Hello guys and welcome back to another FPL video. My name is FPL Meerkat and today I'm doing a little bit of a deep dive into the double game week assets. I'm back in my usual setup as you can see, and I thought I'd get out a few videos, a few different kind of videos rather than just my regular team selection. So today we're going to dive into double game week 25 and who are the best assets from each of the teams doubling. So we're going to get straight into it here with the Luton assets. I've featured Draft Town's top 5 rankings here for the ratings in terms of their expected points. If you want to check out any of Draft Town's features, I've left a link in the description for you to go and check it out. Site that I use quite regularly. Really cool. All the different kind of features they have on the site. But yeah, looking at the top 5 here, they've got Adebayo currently as the top predicted points there with 9.1. Obviously very much helped by the fact he got a hat-trick very recently. He's been scoring fairly regularly and getting assists. Barkley there as well, incredibly high predicted points with 8.8. Morris is probably my favourite out of the lot. He's only predicted 8.0 and he does have a lower ownership than Adebayo, but he is on penalties, which is a huge factor when it comes to making our selections. Any team could get a penalty at any point, and if you've got a penalty taker, then it's a surefire way to get a goal. And of course, forwards get more BPS for scoring a goal, so they're also more likely to come away with like a 9-pointer if Morris can snag a penalty in one of these games. It's a very poor set of fixtures in terms of a defender. Liverpool away, very likely Liverpool going to score in that. United at home, maybe less likely. Luton have been fairly good defensively at home, but yeah, very poor for defenders there. Hence, Doherty is the only defender on the list there and right at the bottom with 6 predicted points, which is still relatively good. You know, that is no clean sheets, but an assist basically is his predicted points there. So I wouldn't really go for any Luton assets, I don't think, in the double. I think if I was to go for one, it would be Morris. I do like the likes of Barkley if you're going to have a cheap midfielder. If you set up for a bench boost this week as well, I think they're a really nice addition to have on a bench boost, but I don't think these are any assets you want to be relying on over and over again, as we saw with the poor performance they had really against Sheffield United. I know they beat Brighton 4-0 and they did manage to score 4 against Newcastle, but I'm not too sure how much that's going to keep up. I think they're a very good goal scoring team, so maybe selecting one of their attackers is a nice idea. But defensively, I just don't think they're that great. You can go for Doherty if you think he's going to get any kind of attacking returns, but I do think he's fairly fortunate to have gotten the amount he has gotten. I know he's creating a ton of chances, but I don't know how much that's going to keep up. So Morris would probably be my favourite here, but yeah, any of the attackers for a last attacker you can have to enable you to get some of the bigger assets, who we'll obviously talk about in a minute, would be a pretty good play, I think. Moving on to Brentford, the Brentford assets. Now, definitely an incredibly hard set of fixtures here with Liverpool at home and Man City away. Ivan Toney would be one of the only players I would look here, to be honest, in terms of an asset. I do, however, despite the top 5 here being Toney, Maupay, Jensen, Lewis Potter and Norgard, not a single defender on the list, I would consider Reguilon. He was on my wildcard draft that I made last week. He got a 12-pointer against Wolves as well, so I would have benched him, to be honest. So a little bit fortunate I didn't do that. But yeah, certainly a lot of differentials here. And Reguilon, I think, has just got the potential to grab an assist, potentially a clean sheet. Really unlikely between either of these two, which is why they're so lowly rated. But I think Reguilon's quite a nice bet for the future. And of course, Brentford do not blank in game week 26, so that's another good reason to pick these guys up. But yeah, I think if you're going to go for anyone here, it would absolutely be Ivan Toney. Seems to be really back in form. He's either scored in every game he's been playing in or almost all of them. I think he might have blanked in one of them. He's on penalties. He could definitely come away quite easily with a double-digit haul here, just if he scores a penalty in either of these two games. I know they're two really tough defences on paper, but Liverpool have been leaking goals. It is at home. I do really like Toney as an asset. Don't think he's a captaincy option for me. Potentially if you want to go a little bit risky, but yeah, it would just be Toney. Maupay, I think, is something worth considering if you don't want to go for an Adebayo. If you need a player maybe for blank game week 26, Maupay's going to have a fixture there as well. And it doesn't look like Mbeumo's coming back anytime soon, so I think his place in the side will be relatively nailed, and he has been playing very well recently. In terms of midfielders, I don't really like any of them. I know Lewis Potter's a nice cheap asset there, but I think I prefer Barkley for relative that price, even though he doesn't have the fixture in game week 26. I do think I prefer the likes of Barkley over him. So I think Tony would be the only player I'd be going here. Maybe Irregulon, but yeah, that would be the only player I'd be looking at. Getting into Liverpool now. Now, I'm recording this video on Tuesday, and we've just got some interesting news that Salah is back in training, back in full training, that is. So there is a very likely possibility that he features in both of the games in the double game week. We will get early team news probably on Liverpool as they are the early kickoff. He could start in that Brentford game. I reckon he might be benched in the Brentford game and then start in the Luton game at home. There is a cup fixture coming up for Liverpool 4 days after Luton, but I think 4 days is enough of a rest for Salah to potentially get a start against Luton and then have a rest and then start against Chelsea. So yeah, Salah's now become a very interesting asset here. Of course, that's not been factored into these expected points here for the Liverpool players. Jota is on top by quite some margin as well, almost a full point ahead, over a full point ahead of Diaz and Darwin. Of course, Darwin with less expected minutes. He does seem to come off a little bit earlier, and he has just come back from injury. But I do like all three of them. I do like all three of Jota, Diaz and Darwin. Trent is nearer the bottom now. He's actually below Virgil van Dijk due to the injury risk. They're two fantastic games as well. Brentford away, a fairly good fixture. Luton at home, a fantastic fixture, especially for the attackers. Again, Luton offensively have been fairly good, so maybe it's not the best on paper for the defenders, but I do reckon there will be a defensive asset that does get an attacking return here. Someone also worth mentioning is Bradley. I would definitely look out for that Friday press conference from Klopp, because Bradley at 4.1 million might play both of these games if Trent is injured and he's now back. Remember, Bradley wasn't injured. He went through very unfortunate circumstances, meaning that he couldn't play the most recent games, and he was in an exceptional form. I would not be surprised if Klopp gives him both of these games to get him back into the side. To reward him for what was honestly some spectacular performances when he was in the side. So for 4.1 million, I would definitely keep your eye out on Bradley. In terms of a triple up, I think I definitely have Jota, no questions asked. I think he's the most likely to get minutes. I think he's the best in front of goal. I think he's just an absolute. I would probably say Darwin as well, given the chance that he did take the most recent penalty. He did miss it, but I do think he's better for goal returns than Diaz is. I know Diaz obviously got the most in the most recent game, but I do think Darwin would be better for returns. And then I'd probably consider Bradley. I would consider Bradley. If Bradley's not available, then I would go for Van Dijk. I don't think Trent is going to play the full game in both of these fixtures. Even if he does start one of them, I think there's a very likely chance he comes off, maybe even before 60, which would be absolutely devastating, and you definitely don't want that. And he's very expensive at the moment, so I wouldn't be looking to buy Trent Alexander-Arnold. If you've got him, hold on to him for now and wait until you get the team news. I would losing a 0.1 million if he falls in price, I think that's absolutely fine for the time being. But yeah, if you want to go for Diaz as a little bit of a differential, I don't mind him at all. There are a lot of assets you could go for in this Liverpool side. And of course, if Salah's back, whose minutes are going to be affected the most? Gakpo, I just think, is an absolute no-go. He could potentially be given the Luton game if Klopp looks to rotate, but I just don't think you can go for him at all. His minutes are far too reliable. If I was to predict who the front three is going to be right now, I would say Salah starts on the bench for this Brentford game, and I would say it's a Jota, Diaz, Darwin front three. And then I reckon it's going to be for the Luton game. I think Gakpo might play, Salah might play, and then it's probably one of these three might get given the game. I think it could be Jota. I'm not too sure at the moment, and of course we'll get more information nearer the time. But yeah, I do really like all three of these assets. And you've got to remember, you would want Liverpool assets even if they just had Luton at home as a fixture. So don't worry if they're not going to start both of these games, because these are two excellent games on paper. So I would definitely look to own at least two of these, maybe three. But yeah, even with the blank coming up in 26, which is why I wouldn't hoard up too much on your Luton assets unless you're looking at free hitting, which I think is a little bit of a waste given that only 4 teams are blanking in Gameweek 28. But yeah, that's my thoughts about the Liverpool assets. And of course, the Man City assets, you don't need me to tell you how good Haaland is. He's not in my team currently, and I really, really wish he was. And he keeps rising in price, which is very frustrating, given he didn't seem to fall at all when people were transferring him out. But anyway, Haaland, the obvious shout. There is a potential that he doesn't do well in the double, and you need to hear me out here. He has struggled historically against the Chelsea defence and the Brentford defence, especially the Brentford defence, purely because if you watch the most recent game they just had against Brentford, both of Brentford's centre-backs are double up on Haaland constantly. That is how Foden was able to get a hat-trick, because both the defenders were occupying Haaland. Foden was able to occupy the spaces created by that, and he slotted home 3 goals. Haaland did manage to get an assist in that game, but he barely had a shot. And even in this most recent Everton game, until 70 minutes, Haaland barely had a sniff as well. He then had the ball fall to him, and he obviously expertly finishes that. And he then had a one-on-one through on goal. Well, it was a 1v1 against Branthwaite, but he made it. It might as well have been a one-on-one. The goalkeeper just absolutely shrugged him off. So yeah, I think Haaland is a very obvious asset, a very great asset, obviously, to pick. But he might not haul. He might not haul in the double game week. Even though he can clearly brace in any game. I think it's the most obvious decision you can make this season, is just a triple captain Haaland and not worry about it. His effective ownership will be well above 200%, so I wouldn't worry about it. Foden, I think, is a fantastic asset. I would definitely have him for this double. He's relatively cheap. He looks like he'll probably start both of these games. Remember, these games aren't the easiest on paper. I know there's also Brentford, which is a pretty good fixture, but City did struggle against Brentford the first time. But these aren't easy games on paper, which means they'll probably go all out in both of these games. I know they've got the Copenhagen game tonight. I'm filming this tonight, so we'll obviously see who's playing in that one. But I think it'll be relatively full strength in both of those games. But yeah, Foden and Haaland are clearly the best two. It just depends who your third asset is. De Bruyne, you would think, is going to be the next best. His minutes aren't as nailed as the others, just because he is still struggling to get back to full fitness. It'll be very interesting to see if he starts against Copenhagen. But I wouldn't be surprised if he starts one of these and is benched in the other. I think 2 starts might be a lot to ask of De Bruyne in this double. Alvarez has started every single game so far this season for Man City, but De Bruyne was injured at the start of the season, and Haaland was injured most recently. So maybe that's why he's been playing all the games. But he has been starting every single game. So I wouldn't be surprised if Alvarez somehow came away with a haul here. Even though he's looked poor on paper, I would definitely consider keeping him around. And I'm currently having this dilemma, as I don't have Haaland, but I do have Alvarez. And when it comes to defenders, Ake seems to be the one to go for. He is predicted the most minutes out of any of the defenders, and he does seem to have a little bit of attacking threat. In terms of the other defenders, no one is really that nailed. It's all very spread around. Walker was the most nailed, but he's been, he's not been starting recently. In terms of going for a Man City defender at all, I do think Man City's defence is incredibly strong on paper, but they just haven't seemed to be able to keep clean sheets for some reason. They do always seem to leak a goal, whether that's at the start of the game, whether that's near the end of the game. It's very interesting because they've got some of the lowest expected goals conceded stats in the league, and yet some of the lowest clean sheets, because they just can't seem to keep, well, not the lowest, but you know what I mean, not near the top for clean sheets. So I think a Man City defender is worth considering. I do prefer a triple up on the attack than I do on 2 on the attack and 1 on the defence. But if you can't squeeze enough money to get to the likes of De Bruyne, then I do like Ake as an option. I do also like Stones. I think John Stones is a good option in the defence. We've seen the likes of Gvardiol, Diaz, Akanji. We've all seen them benched at some point, so it is just a little bit risky. And the problem with the defenders, and the main reason why I prefer the triple up on the attack, is because if your defender gets benched, the game's over, really. You're very unlikely to get an attacking return from your defender if they come off the bench. So the main reason you have defenders is for a clean sheet. And if they're on the bench, they're not getting a clean sheet. So that's pretty much ruined for you. Whereas for an attacker like De Bruyne, even if he gets 30 minutes in the game, he can come on, he can still score a goal and get an assist. So you still feel a lot more optimistic if they're on the bench. it's just very unlikely you get a benching from a defender and they either, they either don't come on, or if they do come on, they get 1 point or less if you're unlucky. So yeah, I think the triple up here would be Haaland, Foden, De Bruyne. If you can't quite squeeze enough for that, especially if Salah's back, it will be very interesting if Salah's back, then I do like Haaland, Foden, Alvarez as a triple up, or Haaland, Foden, Ake as a triple up. I would definitely own 3 City assets as well, despite the rotation risk. This double is pretty good on paper. They're both home fixtures, which is great for City, and they do, most importantly, play in 26, so you can go a lot more. You can load up a lot more on City than you can with the likes of Liverpool. So that's about it for this episode, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please leave a like and get subscribed to the channel if you are enjoying this kind of content. I'll hopefully have a few more videos out this week on various different things servicing around the double. But yeah, how many assets are you planning on having in this double game week? I currently have 6. I don't have any Luton or Brentford, but I don't have Haaland in the team, and I think it's pretty vital for me to get him back, right? And I don't really want to take many hits to get him in. So yeah, I've really got to think about what I'm doing here. And of course, are you going to be using your triple captain, especially if Salah's back? He could be an incredibly differential triple captain given how low his ownership is right now. Or are you just going to slap it on Haaland because it's the obvious thing to do and just not even worry about it? I think most of you will be. But yeah, I hope you have all enjoyed this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next FPL video.